Okay, Michael, it's all yours.
Okay, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist with an interest in mental illness or mental disorder and creativity. And what I'm interested in is the person, the creator themselves. That's the biological person. And I would see a lot of creativity as biological and genetic. And the question is, how do we identify the people who will do this work that you're describing and the other speakers want to describe, or the other people are describing? So the characteristics of the great creators in the past 1,000 years, there was one creator, Newton. Past 100 years, there was one creator at the top, Einstein, etc. So we're dealing with a very narrow body of people, and this is not creativity with a small c. I have nothing to say about creativity with a small c. This is creativity with a maximum C. And Einstein, he shows all the characteristics of people who become great creators. You know, he was slow to speak. He got on badly at university. He couldn't relate to people. He couldn't get a job in university, and he had to go to the patent office. And he had all the great features of people with creativity. The key thing, a key feature, is obviously to have poor social skills, to be able to relate to other people poorly. Because if you have good social skills, you'll be talking to everyone, you'll be gossiping with people, you'll be chatting to everybody, and you won't be doing your research. Einstein and all these great creators, they all like to be alone. Where the place they would like to be in a building is the top of the building, in a room, on the road, with no supervision, nobody interfering with them, nobody checking to see their publications, nobody asking them, what have you done in the past month? With a person like this kind of person, when you get them, you should put them in an isolated place, the top room, give them a problem, and then don't go near them for a year or two. Just pay their salaries, but don't interfere and don't suggest anything for a year or two. When they come for interview, they should have poor eye contact. They should relate poorly. They should speak poorly. They should have a lack of empathy, not zero empathy. They should have a lack of empathy, and they should get pretty much zero almost on every criteria that an interviewer wants from a candidate. But there should be one or two things on their CV. You know, there should be one or two good things on their CV, and they should show a capacity in some level to penetrate some topic to a great degree, a single topic to a great degree, so that you would like them to have a lot of knowledge, enormous knowledge about one thing, but not to know much, not to be a generalist, not to be good at many things. They have to be workaholics, obviously, and they have to work at constantly for years. And most of these people work for years on a single topic. This would be typical of Nobel Prize winners. Lots of them who have, like Watson or whatever, who have autism. But there's a contradiction to all this, to this workaholism, to this hyper focus, and that's only something that I've become aware of recently, and it goes with Einstein as well. Einstein did all those things I described, but one other thing that was absolutely critical for Einstein was his violin. And when after he did this kind of work for hours, he would take up his violin and he would play the violin. And this you don't need, I mean, the violin, that's what Einstein used to do. Other people do other things. But the key thing is basically playing the violin. I'm saying that is almost letting his mind go blank, that his mind go loose. And the great, or he should go for a walk. So you should have periods if you want to get the best out of people, where they do nothing. They think about nothing. They wander around. And they show poor in it. They have no attention during this period. Their mind just wanders. And this is a crucial part of creativity. And it's when you come back from this period of doing nothing, just wandering around, playing the violin or whatever, it's during that period often the best ideas come. Because what you do during the hyper-focused during thing is that you're pumping things into your unconscious, and and nowadays we talk about the cognitive unconscious. This is a critical unconscious. This cognitive unconscious will solve problems. Now, if you don't stop working, if you don't wander around, you won't give the cognitive unconscious any chance to work, to solve the problems. So you have to hand over your mind to the cognitive unconscious for a period. And Einstein did that when he was playing the violin. All the mathematicals and so on, it went into the unconscious. He didn't stop working, but he stopped working consciously, but his unconscious continued to work. And it's out of lots of mathematicians will describe when they solve a problem. The solution often comes when they're putting their leg on a bus. One of the great mathematicians, he got the solution to a massive piece of mathematics when he put his foot on the bus. He was on holiday, but he'd obviously put his foot on the bus. So he just remembered at that time when he but that's when the cognitive unconscious had completed its work and had given him the solution. You get it in dreams as well, like the benzene ring that came out as a snake. You know, the solution came during the night, during his dreaming. So I think there's a great paradox here that you have to have in hyper focus on the one hand, and then periods of doing utterly nothing. Obviously, you have to be totally persistent, and he was totally persistent. Now, Einstein was very visual, but other people, and he visualized things. Before he did his physics and so on, he visualized kind of the problem. And so this ability to visualize or tapping into the visual is one way. Now, other people may be more auditory. You know, they may have other senses that they will use to help them on the creative road. But for Einstein, it was the visual that was critical. The other thing is he had it, and you have to have an immature emotional personality. Now, this kind of personality, and Einstein said this himself, you have to be able to see things through the eyes of a child. The child sees all the detail. The adult doesn't see detail. The adult just sees the overall picture. And the overall picture is actually is almost a form of blindness, because you're missing all the detail. And the problem is that the educational system fills the mind with overall pictures, with broad brush strokes, and that is totally inhibitory to creativity. Where you want to get rid of, you have to be trained, obviously, as a scientist or whatever. But then, if you want to do something new, you almost have to. You have to throw away all your education, everything that you've ever been taught, and you have to kind of start anew. And unless you can get rid of that baggage, like the artists, all the artists, to move forward, any of the artists, they had to throw away, they had to throw overboard all the baggage of previous artists. There's no possibility of doing any original art if you don't overthrow everything that you were taught, everything that they were taught as an artist before. So then you have to be very original, and and then one has to have confidence as well in oneself to go down this route. You have to have the confidence. A lot of them, a lot of our great people, they might be socially, they would lack confidence, but in their work, they often have supreme confidence, and they have the ability to stick at one thing for years, and they follow their own nose all the time. I mean, the other phrases that people use, thinking outside the box. So if you're wanting to get these, you have to be a kind of an outsider. So in a way, all of these things I've described, all the characteristics of Einstein would be, he wouldn't come across well as a human being. He wouldn't have the characteristics of what people regard as valuable. One other thing is he had an offspring which he abandoned completely, who had schizophrenia. And if you want to be a great artist, if you're the only one great person who ever had schizophrenia that I know of was John Nash, who I wrote about and was in contact with before he died in a car crash. Now, for the first half of John Nash's life, when he did all his work on game theory, he had autism, and he was brilliant during that time. When he developed schizophrenia, and he had florid schizophrenia, obviously he lost his creativity. But there's endless examples of this. So if you were setting up a team, you know, if to get creative people, and this is basically what that's all my story is, that you'd pick outsiders, and you'd pick eccentric, unusual people, and normal people never achieved anything in their life. Once you have any normality and in life, then if you have normality or you consider yourself a normal person, then you have no chance at all of high creativity. So if you like, a normal person would be a person who lives in a semi-detached, is married, maybe has 2 children, you know, goes to the pub for a pint on Friday night, and has friends, celebrates parties, celebrates birthdays, and all that. All of those traits are killers for creativity. And because I would say it's 90% genetic in relation to creativity. All creativity is about 50% genetic, but when you get the extreme creativity like Einstein, you're talking about 90% or even maybe higher in terms of genetic factors. And of course, his brain was abnormal as well. He had a larger brain in the area where you do mathematics and so on. So it is a kind of biological phenomenon. So in terms of, you know, I don't have much to offer actually in terms of creativity in a kind of a direct problem-solving way, because my interest is in the creative person, rather than the one if there's any Germany here, well, Eugene, you know, for the last week I've spent the time with W.G. Sebald, you know, who's a great German writer, who's a great English writer as well. But I mean, he wrote in an autistic fashion, and he had autism. So this kind of creativity, creativity can spread across all disciplines. Unfortunately, it's not just, sometimes it's thought it's only mathematics and it's only physics, but that's not true. It's in every discipline. And this has been known for thousands of years. You know, Shakespeare noted, you know, artistry close to madness. It all going back thousands of years. Everybody said the same thing about the intelligent people. They were seen as gods. They were seen as touched by gods.
Okay.
The discussion has never shifted in I'd say since the beginning of written records from where it's at now. But we know it's obviously it's genetic, but then when you want to go down, what's the neurobiology of it? What genes are involved? You have dopamine, which is kind of a novelty-seeking gene. I've written a book on that.
Yeah.
But there are certain genes that are obviously they're involved. But that's maybe we might be in the next 50 years we might understand creativity at a more neurobiological level.
Okay, Michael, that's very, very interesting. We want to bring Einstein into organizations. So the question to me is, what would Einstein do if he was faced with the big problems of today? And what would he do differently, perhaps, to get those solved?
Well, I'll give you the example of sorting out the German code during the Second World War. That's a very good example. Turing, who had autism, was a key figure there. But what they did in Britain was they went to the universities, they got all the best mathematicians, all the best computer specialists in Britain, and they put them all into one building. And using that, they were able to break the Enigma code. The effect of that was to shorten the Second World War by 2 years. So if you want to, the first thing is to get the potential creators into the room, is to identify the people and not have round people putting people into the wrong box. That's a disaster. So he would, if you want, Einstein would probably get people like himself. And of course, I guess the people he related to were really people like himself, Niels Bohr, and I mean all the great scientists, almost physicists at that time, they were probably in Germany anyhow, and surrounding countries. And so you have to get you have to get them into the room, and you have to identify the people who can solve the problem. If you don't get the people who have the ability to solve the problem, you're putting the cart before the horse.
What about paradigms or procedures when they stand in the way? What would Einstein do?
Well, I think I think he worked a lot from the blank page. There was a lot of free association of ideas. Although he was very well trained in physics, electromagnetics, you name it. But when he did his work, he did work. You have to identify the problem, and then I think you have to. I mean, this is what Steve Jobs, who had autism as well, what he did, and he got all once or twice a year. He got all his big people into a room, and they brainstormed, and they came up with, say, 10 ideas that were looking forward, that would take computers forward. Then the next thing he did actually was choose 2 of those ideas, and then they put all the focus of the company on those 2 ideas that they had changed. So it's
Okay, what about other questions you may have? Nobody? No questions?
Or comments or criticisms?
Not really a question. I just want to applaud the speech of Michael, because it's absolutely beautiful, warm-hearted. I didn't know that your background was a psychiatrist, and really it is such a heartwarming type of experience listening to you explaining the sense of Einstein, and also the nothing point that you explained to get away from all the dogmas and all the instructions of our current society, to become absolutely creative into a totally new sense is such a warm. Well, it's a fresh breath. It's really fantastic, and that is exactly what we. If Eugen asks, well, if we have to go into a society, organizations, we have to take those organizations outside themselves.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's absolutely beautiful. So I'm really very pleased with this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it's almost clearing, causing a blank mind. The problem is our mind is so full of theories. And that's what development means, developing theories about the world. And half the theories we develop are false. So, but how do you clear the mind of theories? How do you make a blank mind? That's a contradiction in terms. There is a bit of that there.
Barry, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was going to follow up on Eugen's prompt there. You know, Einstein had a fabulous ability to construct concise and insightful mathematical models of manifestly observable phenomena. Now, the observable phenomena that he attended was the hard sciences, the hard physics. Anybody can go out there and try to measure the behavior of light and the behavior of gravitational systems. And he took a look at those and thought long and hard about them. And his response was not a story, but mathematical models that exquisitely characterize the behavior of manifestly observable systems in the hard sciences. Now, Mila and Michael have talked about another set of manifestly observable phenomena, not in the hard sciences, but in the behavior of human beings, behavior of human societies. And everybody can spend their whole life observing the behavior of human systems. And so if I were to say, what was Einstein's strength applied to that, you'd say, what concise mathematical models would somebody like Einstein come up with to capture the behavior of human systems? And I think that the answer to that is it's possible to do that. It is possible to construct concise, insightful, computable mathematical models that capture the behavior of psychological systems, and in particular, the two most manifestly observable features of humans are, one, the ability to learn. And some people learn very well and autodidactically, and some people don't. And the other feature that humans have are, we have emotional states. We have a very rich constellation of emotions. And the question that I wanted to answer 35 years ago is, how are those two features connected? How does the ability to learn connect to the phenomenon of manifesting emotional states? And why aren't there any mathematical models showing how those are related? And I found that you can construct mathematical models relating to emotions and learning, and that they can yield insights that you wouldn't just get sort of by crude intuition.
I just take up one thing you said, autodidactic. One of the biggest characteristics of all the great creators is an ability for autodidactic learning.
Exactly.
And actually, without autodidactic learning, I think you can achieve nothing.
I agree 100%.
Okay, I would say one last question from Heiner.
So we are going on to the next presentation. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to comment, but that's okay. I can wait later.
No, let Mila go first.
No, Heiner, please.
No, I'm last.
Do you still want to record?
Okay, two.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
Please.
Please record.
Okay, Mila?
Heiner?
No, Mila. I'm last.
Okay, well, I mean, Barry, this is just beautiful. I'm very grateful for the presentation and the provocative material or ideas, as well as the questions. Barry, I'm very, very grateful for what you just said, because if you were able to come up with, what's the word? All of a sudden, I'm losing the word in English. Not the arithmetics, but the algorithms, right?
Yeah.
The algorithms, like the capturing of it, then you would be able to set the algorithm in motion to supposedly I was going to say the end or the goal. I don't like that expression, but the goal would be to mathematically, in reverse, unleash the genius in others, right?
Exactly.
Which would go into programming people for genius, for creativity, right? And we know, we both wonder about that. And I wonder here with you, which is so exciting to kind of share thinking on your toes, and dancing on our toes together. To be thinking at the same time, it's exciting, and at the same time, it's eerie, right? To think of that. And to, at the same time, think how can we learn from the models of which Michael speaks, the patterns, the psychosocial patterns, or the psychosocial models or systems that you mentioned, Barry, of a particular profile, of a say, unique, authentic individual, right? And how we can foster or nurture the genius of others. And it's an interesting correspondence correlation between nurturing and certain environments. And I think we might, Michael, you can check me on this, since you spoke of a paradox of hyper-focus and then the pendulum swings into not being productive, but profoundly creative on the inside in the cognitive subconscious. I think there's regarding the social context surrounding that individual, there's also another correlated paradox. This kind of individuality develops between the extremes of very nurturing environment or profoundly injuring or dysfunctional environment, or a particular kind of injury that is dealt to the psychology of a child. So, and I think it's actually the subtlety of emotional neglect that triggers that more than any kind of physical brutality that does it. Because in the formation of, these are very, very fine lines that we're walking here. I mean, we're all aware of that. Anywhere from, programming people to fine notions of abuse. And I mean, we're teeter-tottering on fine razor edge line of what it would take to unleash creative genius. But I just wanted to kind of give my insight and think about the paradoxes of the inner workings, so to speak, of the personality and the outer surrounding environmental situation of the individual. And then, of course, I have 1,000 questions that I would like about that, to ask about that, but and I'll put on the table just one more note. I mean, speaking of the double current of creation, of the involution and evolution, how does one recognize, first of all, how do we socially recognize the seed or the involuted ignorance and this awkwardness of maladjustment of which Michael speaks of this individual? How do we recognize that as involuted social ignorance that is the vouchsafing for unique genius, right? And at the same time, how then we socially create environment that will help the evolution of the individual that can make contribution to collectivity in return. So it's a lot of material.
Just my responses to that. It sounds to me like something we have readily available. A year ago, I interviewed, or was it a year ago? A little bit more already. I interviewed Michael with the question, what would Einstein, Newton, and Darwin do? The interview is available on YouTube, and there we have put together a couple of characteristics one should look for when this level of creativity is wanted. So given the matter of time, we have still a lot to do. I would suggest, Barry, could you, no, sorry, Heinrich was, could you, bring your question in and perhaps keep it short.
I'm always short, as you know. Michael, thank you very much. I just only want to point out that I was with this new Einstein fellow in the Mendelssohn Palais, where Einstein always played the violin. And Einstein was visited by Tagore, the 8-year Nobel laureate, and they could not speak English because Einstein was very poor in English at that time. He was never really good, as I understand, but they could communicate through mathematics and music. So I have all the transcripts here with us, with the Tagore-Einstein Council, but I want to really not subsume and resonate with what you were saying, but really propel it a little bit further, because Barry spoke about mathematical models. And that is my struggle with him since I know him. The model needs to be embodied. It has to be enlivened, like Mila is doing with dancing and performative arts. So when we only keep it in the abstract, we are not speaking about Einstein. So he was a living man. And I would like to follow up much further, but Edwin always says I have to be short. Over.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just say that I agree with all the things that have been said have been very interesting. Obviously, a creative person has to develop new algorithms. That's one of the problems. Once you get an algorithm, I suppose you have some model, you have some theory, but the problem is to get the algorithm. The second thing is that a worker not working is wasting time if he's wandering around the park doing nothing. That I would argue that's probably when he's doing the best work, because his cognitive unconscious is working. And then with creative individuals, the problem with these is that they get into social trouble. These kind of people will say something inappropriate to a woman, and then they're accused of sexual abuse, or they're accused and then they're dismissed. This happens over and over again, and they misinterpret signals from a woman without any badness, without any malicious. They're not pedophiles or anything like that, but just so you have to create an environment where people understand these people and can be sensitive to them. And not just because they would be very like Einstein. Einstein was got rid of from the university because they didn't feel he was suitable for a junior lecturer's post. I assume that was because of his social problems, and this is a perfect example. So if you want to create creative spaces, you have to create spaces where you can hold Einstein, where the Einsteins of this world, the slightly eccentric, odd people of this world. And I don't think we talk enough about how creativity and creative individuals are destroyed. In my work, I've seen it over and over again, where people have said something inappropriate or done something very minor. But obviously it was because there are problems with empathy and they're not able to read the situations. So that's just another addition.
Okay. So I would say thank you very, very much, Michael. We need to move on to the next agenda item. You are most welcome to stay and contribute further. It's all up to you. So with that, I would like to give it to Jamie and to provide his presentation or whatever talk. Given the time, this was very interesting, so I'll let it go a little bit. I would say let's try to keep within the 20 minutes with perhaps 5 minutes Q&A, and it might be worthwhile if we not interrupt him and then get to the Q&A. Jamie, all yours.
I'm very grateful again. I did not prepare a presentation, so I'm going to talk responsively on a few of the topics. One was that I was fortunate enough in my very young years to get snippets of insight into Einstein, because in around 1939, 1940, my father attended the University of Pennsylvania, and he had friends who were physicists who studied with Einstein. And so my mother and father, as young teenagers, early adults, were at Einstein parties. And one of the things I remember my mother telling me was that playing the violin was an intrinsic part of every soiree that they had. It was very, very important. So I can vouch for that association.